When worlds collide, Amelia Rosewood adjusted her simple black blazer for the third time as she stepped into the marble lobby of Blackwood Industries. The towering glass building reached toward the Seattle sky like a monument to success, making her feel smaller with each echoing footstep across the polished floor. At 26, she had worked her way up from a coffee shop barista to executive assistant through sheer determination and countless late nights studying business courses online. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her emerald eyes reflected both intelligence and the quiet confidence she had built over years of proving herself. Unlike the designer-clad executives who swept past her, Amelia wore clothes from department store sales, carefully chosen to look professional without breaking her modest budget. She carried herself with dignity, despite knowing she didn't belong. In this world of luxury and privilege, "Good morning, Miss Rosewood," called Henry, the security guard, who had become her friend over the past 2 years. "Mr. Blackwood's been pacing his office since 7. Big day today." Amelia smiled warmly. "Thank you, Henry. I'll get right up there." The elevator ride to the 50th floor gave her a moment to review her mental checklist: board meeting preparations, quarterly reports, 3 client calls, and the mysterious appointment James had marked as urgent personal matter on his calendar. After 2 years as his executive assistant, she had learned to read his moods and anticipate his needs, but lately, something had shifted between them. The professional distance they maintained seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. The billionaire's dilemma. James Blackwood stood at his office window watching the morning traffic crawl through downtown Seattle. At 34, he had inherited Blackwood Industries at 25 and transformed it from a successful regional company into a global empire worth $12 billion. His dark hair showed hints of premature silver at the temples, testament to the weight of responsibility he carried. Steel gray eyes missed nothing. Whether in boardrooms or studying quarterly projections, today, however, his mind wasn't on business. The annual Pacific Northwest Charity Gala was tomorrow night, an event where Seattle's elite gathered to see and be seen while writing checks for various causes. For years, his mother Catherine had orchestrated his attendance with carefully selected companions from their social circle. This year, she had her heart set on Preston Hartwell's younger sister, Vivian, a perfectly suitable match from old Seattle money. James loosened his Italian silk tie, feeling suffocated by expectations. He had built his fortune on bold decisions and calculated risks, yet when it came to his personal life, he felt trapped by family obligations and social conventions. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." Amelia entered with his morning coffee, prepared exactly how he liked it. Black, no sugar, with a touch of cinnamon. She moved with quiet efficiency, setting the cup on his desk while organizing the day's priority files. "The Morrison contract needs your signature before 10, she said, her voice carrying the slight musical accent from her Oregon hometown. "The board meeting materials are ready, and I've confirmed your lunch with the Portland development team," James found himself studying her profile as she worked. Amelia possessed an understated beauty that grew more apparent the longer he knew her. Her intelligence shone through every interaction, and her genuine warmth had won over even the most difficult clients and demanding board members. She handled crisis situations with grace and had an intuitive understanding of people that made her invaluable. "Amelia, please sit down. I need to discuss something with you." She looked up, surprised by the serious tone in his voice. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwood?" "James," he corrected, as he had many times before. "Please, just James." She settled into the chair across from his desk, clasping her hands in her lap. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows caught the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Tomorrow night is the Pacific Northwest Charity Gala," he began, then paused, running a hand through his hair. "Every year, my family expects me to attend with someone they consider appropriate, someone from our social circle who fits their vision of what the future Mrs. Blackwood should be." Amelia nodded politely, though she felt a strange tightness in her chest. She had always known James would eventually marry someone from his world, someone who understood charity galas in summer, homes in the Hamptons. This year, they've chosen Vivian Hartwell, a lovely girl, impeccable breeding, everything my mother wants in a daughter-in-law. James stood, and began pacing. But I've realized something, Amelia. I don't want to spend the most important social event of the year with someone I barely know, making polite conversation about topics that bore me senseless. He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. I want to go with someone who challenges me intellectually, who makes me laugh, who sees beyond the money and the name. I want to go with you. A shocking proposal. Malia felt her heart skip several beats. Mr. Black, James, I don't think I understand what you're asking. I'm asking you to be my date to the gala tomorrow night, not as my employee, but as the woman I've come to care about deeply over the past 2 years. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. Amelia's mind raced through 1,000 reasons why this was impossible. She thought about her tiny studio apartment in Capitol Hill, her student loan payments, her second job tutoring high school students on weekends to make ends meet. James, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't belong in that world. I don't have the right clothes, the right background, the right connections. People like your mother's friends will see right through me. James moved around his desk, stopping just close enough that she could catch the subtle scent of his cologne. You're right about one thing. You don't belong in their world because you're better than their world. You have something they'll never understand. Authenticity. He crouched down so they were at eye level. Amelia, these past 2 years working with you have been the best of my professional life. But more than that, you've made me remember who I wanted to be before I got lost. In family expectations and social obligations, her green eyes searched his face, looking for any sign that this was some kind of elaborate joke or misguided pity. Instead, she saw vulnerability she had never witnessed before. What about your family? Your mother will be furious. The board members who will be there will question your judgment. And Vivian Hartwell, what about her? James smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in weeks. Let me worry about my family and the board. As for Vivian, I called her an hour ago and explained that I had other plans. She was actually relieved. Apparently, she's been seeing someone her parents don't approve of. My unavailability gives her the perfect excuse to bring her real boyfriend. Amelia stood up, moving to the window to collect her thoughts. Below them, Seattle bustled with people pursuing their daily lives. Unaware of the life-changing conversation happening 50 floors above, the weight of decision, James. You don't understand what you're asking. I've seen how these events work in magazines and movies. These people will judge everything about me. How I walk, how I talk, what I wear, which fork I use for the salad course. They'll know immediately that I don't belong. James joined her at the window, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Do you remember the Henderson merger last year, when their CEO tried to steamroll us with those ridiculous contract terms? Of course. He had me research their financial history and find leverage points. He didn't just find leverage. Discovered they were on the verge of bankruptcy and turned the entire negotiation around. You saved this company $30 million with your insight and preparation. He turned to face her. Do you remember the charity auction 3 months ago when Mrs. Pemberton had that medical emergency? Amelia nodded. She had been working late when James called, frantic because the elderly board member had collapsed during the auction. Amelia had immediately coordinated with paramedics, contacted Mrs. Pemberton's family, and managed to keep the event running smoothly while ensuring the woman received proper medical attention. You handled that crisis with more grace and competence than anyone else there, including people who've been attending those events their entire lives. You have nothing to prove to anyone, Amelia. She remained quiet for a long moment, wrestling with fears and dreams she had barely allowed herself to acknowledge. Over the past 2 years, her professional relationship with James had evolved into something deeper. She had caught herself looking forward to their morning coffee discussions, staying late just to help him work through complex problems, and feeling a flutter of excitement when he smiled at her suggestions. If I say yes, this changes everything between us. We can't go back to just being boss and employee. I don't want to go back, James said softly. I want to move forward with you. Family storm clouds before Amelia could respond. James's office. Door burst open without warning. Catherine Blackwood swept in wearing a tailored cream suit and an expression that could freeze champagne. At 58, She had maintained her elegant beauty through rigorous self-discipline and the finest skincare. Money could buy, her silver hair was styled in a perfect chignon, and her blue eyes, so similar to James's, blazed with maternal fury. James Theodore Blackwood, what is this nonsense I'm hearing from Vivian Hartwell about you canceling your arrangement for tomorrow's gala? Amelia immediately moved to leave, but James caught her hand gently. Please stay, Amelia, Mother. I'd like you to meet Amelia Rosewood, my executive assistant, and tomorrow evening's date. Catherine's gaze swept over Amelia like a laser scanner, cataloging everything from her department store shoes to her simple jewelry. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Your assistant? How wonderfully progressive of you, darling. Catherine's voice dripped with disapproval. Rosewood, isn't it? I'm sure you're very competent at whatever it is you do here. But surely you understand that tomorrow's gala isn't appropriate for someone of your background. Amelia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. Mrs. Blackwood, I understand. You're concerned about maintaining proper appearances? Oh, you do? Catherine raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Tell me, dear, where exactly did you attend finishing school? Which debutante ball was your coming out? Who are your people? James stepped between them. Mother, that's enough. Amelia's qualifications for accompanying me have nothing to do with finishing schools or debutante balls. Catherine laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. James, you're being naive? The Pacific Northwest Gala isn't just a party. It's where business alliances are formed, political connections are made, and social hierarchies are established. The Hendersons will be there, the Montgomerys, the Ashfords. These are families whose relationships with us span generations. Turned back to Amelia with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure you're a lovely girl, Miss Rosewood, but you simply don't understand the complexities of our world. One wrong word, one social misstep, and it reflects on the entire Blackwood family reputation. The challenge accepted Amelia had endured years of condescension from professors who doubted her potential, employers who underestimated her abilities, and classmates who assumed her second-hand clothes meant second-rate intelligence. But Catherine Blackwood's dismissal struck deeper because it threatened to take away something she had never dared hope for, a chance at love with a man she had admired from afar for 2 years. Mrs. Blackwood, you're absolutely right that I don't come from your world. My father was a high school teacher, and my mother worked as a nurse. I put myself through college with scholarships, part-time jobs, and student loans that I'm still paying off. Catherine nodded, as if this confirmed her. Worse suspicions? But Amelia continued, her voice growing stronger. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business administration. I've increased the efficiency of this office by 40% since I started working here. Read every major business publication cover to cover for the past 5 years. And I can discuss everything from quantum computing to medieval poetry. She took a step closer to Catherine. More importantly, I genuinely care about your son as a person, not as a bank account or social stepping stone. I've watched him work 18-hour days, not because he has to, but because he cares about the 12,000 people who depend on this company for their livelihoods. James watched this exchange with growing admiration and something that might have been love. He had seen Amelia handle difficult clients and demanding board members. But watching her stand up to his mother revealed a strength and dignity that took his breath away. Catherine studied Amelia with new interest, recognizing a worthy opponent. Pretty words, my dear. But tomorrow night, you'll be surrounded by people who can trace their family trees back to the Mayflower, who own summer homes in Martha's Vineyard and winter chalets in Aspen. They'll spot you as an outsider within 5 minutes. Then I'll have to make sure those 5 minutes count, Amelia replied. Past secrets and present dangers. Before Catherine could respond, James's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. Preston Hartwell. Excuse me for a moment. James took the call. Catherine moved closer to Amelia, lowering her voice. You seem intelligent, Miss Rosewood, so let me be direct. My son is heir to a fortune that makes him a target for every social climber and gold digger on the West Coast. I've spent his entire life protecting him from women who see dollar signs instead of the man. Amelia met her gaze steadily. I fell in love with James before I knew his net worth. I care about him enough to walk away if I thought I was hurting him. Love, Catherine repeated the word, as if tasting something bitter. How wonderfully romantic. But love doesn't navigate hostile corporate takeovers or manage family foundations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Love doesn't understand that. Every public appearance, every social connection, every relationship reflects on our family's reputation and business interests. James finished his call, his expression troubled. That was Preston. Apparently, word is already spreading through our social circle about tomorrow night. He seemed to think I should know that some people are calling it a publicity stunt or a phase I'm going through. Catherine's smile was triumphant. You see, it's already starting. By tomorrow night, every gossip columnist and society blogger in the Northwest will be watching to see if the Blackwood heir has lost his mind. Amelia felt her resolve wavering. The reality of what she was agreeing to hit her like a wave. She would be stepping into a world where her every gesture would be analyzed, where one mistake could become tomorrow's headline. Maybe your mother is right, she said quietly. Maybe I should step aside and let you take someone more appropriate. James moved to her side immediately. Amelia, look at me. When she raised her eyes to his, she saw determination that reminded her why she had fallen for him in the first place. 2 years ago, you walked into this office for an interview wearing a suit you probably bought at a thrift store with a resume that showed more heart than connections. I hired you not because of your background, but because I saw something. Special intelligence, integrity, and a strength that couldn't be bought or bred. He took her hands, ignoring his mother's disapproving stare. Tomorrow night, I want to walk into that gala with the most remarkable woman I know. Not the most connected, not the wealthiest, not the one with the most famous last name, the most remarkable. That's you, Amelia. The decision that changes everything. Catherine watched this exchange with growing frustration. She had spent years carefully cultivating James's social circle, introducing him to appropriate young women who understood their responsibilities to family and tradition. Now her carefully laid plans were crumbling because her son had developed feelings for his employee. James, you're thinking with your heart instead of your head. What happens when the novelty wears off? What happens when Miss Rosewood realizes she's completely out of her depth in our world? What happens to the family reputation when this relationship inevitably fails? What happens if it doesn't fail? James countered. What happens if I've found someone who makes me a better man instead of just a richer one? Amelia listened to this argument about her future, feeling like a prize in a contest she never entered. But as she watched James defend her against his mother's objections, she realized something important. This wasn't just about attending a gala or proving she belonged in high society. This was about having the courage to reach for something extraordinary, even if it meant risking failure. I'll go, she said, interrupting the family debate. Both Blackwoods turned to look at her. I'll be your date tomorrow night, James, but I have conditions. Name them, he said immediately. First, if I embarrass you or your family, I'll leave. Quietly, and we'll pretend this never happened. Second, I won't let you buy me an expensive dress or jewelry. I'll find something appropriate within my budget. Third, after tomorrow night, we both take time to think about what this means for our working relationship and our personal feelings. James wanted to argue about the dress and jewelry, but he recognized the pride and independence that made her special. Agreed. Catherine gathered her purse, preparing to leave with a final warning. James, I hope you know what you're doing. Tomorrow night will either be a triumph or a disaster, and there will be no middle ground. After his mother left, James and Amelia stood in the quiet office, both understanding that they had crossed a line from which there was no return. Are you sure about this? James asked softly. Amelia thought about her small apartment, her student loans, her complete lack of experience with high society. Then she thought about 2 years of sharing coffee and conversation with a man who treated her as an equal, who valued her mind, and who made her believe she could be more than she ever dreamed. I'm terrified, she admitted, but I'm sure. The Seattle skyline stretched out before them. Neither could imagine how dramatically their lives would change in the next 24 hours. or how their love would be tested by forces more powerful than family disapproval and social expectations. The die was cast. And tomorrow night would determine whether love truly could conquer all, or whether some barriers were simply too high to cross. The night before everything changed, Gainawan 4 hours after accepting James's invitation, Amelia stood in her modest Capitol Hill apartment, staring at 3 dresses spread across her narrow bed. Each represented a different version of who she might become tomorrow night. The black dress was safe but boring. The navy blue was professional but uninspired. And the deep emerald green was beautiful, but perhaps too bold for someone trying to blend in. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Rebecca Chen, a nurse at Seattle General, who had been Amelia's roommate during college. "Girl, you still haven't told me what you're wearing to meet the billionaire elite tonight. Please tell me you didn't spend your rent money on a dress." Amelia smiled despite her nerves. Rebecca knew her too well. She had indeed spent more than she could afford on the emerald dress, justifying it as an investment in her future. Though she wasn't sure what kind of future that might be, the apartment felt smaller than usual as she paced between the kitchenette and the living area that doubled as her bedroom. 2 years of careful budgeting had allowed her to create a cozy space with secondhand furniture she had refinished herself, books stacked on every available surface, and photographs of her family back in Oregon covering one wall. Her laptop sat open on the small dining table, displaying research she had compiled about the other attendees at tonight's gala. She had studied their businesses, their philanthropic interests, their family histories, preparing like she was cramming for the most important exam of her life. If Catherine Blackwood was right about people spotting her as an outsider within 5 minutes, she was determined to make those 5 minutes count. Unexpected revelations, knock at her door interrupted her preparation ritual. Through the peephole, she saw James standing in the hallway, holding a large garment bag and looking completely out of place in the modest apartment building. "James, what are you doing here?" she asked, opening the door while suddenly conscious of her yoga pants and oversized sweater. "I know you said you didn't want me to buy you anything, but I brought options," he said, stepping into her apartment and looking around with genuine interest rather than judgment. "My grandmother's jewelry collection. I thought you might want to choose something to borrow." He set the garment bag aside and opened a velvet case that took Amelia's breath away. Inside were pieces that belonged in a museum. Emerald earrings. That matched her dress perfectly. A delicate pearl necklace with a diamond clasp. And a sapphire bracelet that caught the light like captured starlight. "James, I can't wear these. They're probably worth more than I make in 5 years. They're sitting in a safe deposit box doing nothing but collecting dust. My grandmother would have loved to see them worn by someone who appreciates their beauty, rather than their price tag." He picked up the emerald earrings, holding them up to catch the afternoon light streaming through her small window. "These would be perfect with your dress and your eyes." Amelia felt her resolve weakening. The earrings were stunning, and she could imagine how they would complete her carefully planned outfit. But accepting them felt like crossing another line, moving further from her authentic self toward someone she wasn't sure she could sustain being. "There's something else," James said, his voice becoming more serious. "I had lunch with Preston Hartwell today. He wanted to discuss tomorrow night." "About it?" James moved to her small couch, and she joined him, noting how her modest furniture seemed to shrink around his presence. "Preston's been asking questions about you. Background checks, financial records, family history. He claims he's looking out for my interests, but I think there's something else going on." Amelia felt cold dread settling in her stomach. "What kind of questions? Why you left your last job? Why you moved to Seattle with no connections? Whether there might be anything in your past that could embarrass the family?" James took her hand. "Amelia, is there anything you haven't told me? Anything that Preston might find that could be used against you?" She was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with a secret she had hoped never to reveal. Finally, she stood up and walked to her bookshelf, pulling out a photo album she had kept hidden behind her college textbooks. "My father wasn't just a high school teacher," she said, returning to sit beside James. "He was fired when I was 16 for reporting that the school principal was embezzling funds from the athletic program. Dad was right, but the principal Had connections on the school board. They destroyed his reputation, made it impossible for him to get another teaching job. She opened the album to a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Teacher's accusations lead to investigation. We lost our house. My parents had to declare bankruptcy. Dad ended up working as a night janitor, while Mom picked up extra nursing shifts to keep us afloat." James studied the clipping, then looked at her with new understanding. "That's why you're so careful with money. Why you work so hard to prove yourself. I learned that doing the right thing doesn't always protect you from consequences, but I also learned that integrity matters more than security." She turned to another page, showing a later article. "Principal sentenced to 5 years for embezzlement. Dad was eventually vindicated, but it took 3 years and we never recovered financially. Preston could use this against you. Make it seem like your family has a history of causing trouble for authority figures." Amelia closed the album. "Then maybe I should bow out gracefully, save you the embarrassment." James turned her face toward him. "Amelia, your father stood up to corruption even when it cost him everything. That doesn't make your family troublemakers. It makes you people of principle. If Preston wants to twist that into something negative, it says more about him than about you." The transformation 3 hours before the gala, Rebecca arrived with a makeup kit and styling tools, determined to help her best friend prepare for the most important night of her life. "Okay, spill everything," Rebecca demanded, setting up her supplies in Amelia's tiny bathroom. "How exactly did you go from filing his reports to being his date at the social event of the season?" Amelia filled her in on the past 24 hours. While Rebecca worked magic with foundation and concealer, "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and discover this was all an elaborate dream. Honey, this is real and you deserve it." Rebecca applied eyeshadow with the precision of an artist. "You've worked harder than anyone I know. You put yourself through college, supported your parents when your dad was out of work, and you've excelled at every job you've ever had. But what if his mother is right? What if I embarrass him?" Rebecca stopped what she was doing and looked at Amelia. "Seriously, listen to me. You're going to walk into that ballroom, and some people might judge you based on your background. But anyone worth knowing will see what I see. A brilliant, compassionate, hardworking woman who makes everyone around her better." An hour later, Amelia barely recognized herself in the mirror. The emerald dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves while maintaining elegance. Rebecca had styled her auburn hair in an upswept arrangement that showed off the borrowed emerald earrings. Her makeup was subtle but transformative, highlighting her best features while keeping her natural beauty intact. "You look like a movie star," Rebecca breathed. "James Blackwood is going to forget how to speak when he sees you." A text from James confirmed he was downstairs with the car. Amelia took one last look around her small apartment, feeling like she was saying goodbye to her old life. Even if it was only for one evening. The Lion's Den, the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, had been transformed into a winter wonderland, with thousands of white lights creating artificial stars. Across the ceiling and ice sculptures serving as elegant centerpieces, the cream of Seattle society moved through the space like beautiful expensive fish in an aquarium, their conversations a carefully orchestrated dance of networking and social positioning. Amelia held James's hand on her back as they paused at the ballroom entrance, allowing the photographers to capture their arrival. She had prepared for this moment, knowing the pictures would appear in tomorrow's society pages, but the reality of camera flashes and shouted questions was overwhelming. "Mr. Blackwood, who is your lovely companion? Is this the mystery woman we've been hearing about, miss? Could you tell us your name?" James guided her through the press gauntlet with practiced ease. "Gentlemen, ladies, I'd like you to meet Amelia Rosewood. We're here to support the Children's Hospital Foundation, so let's keep the focus on the cause." Once inside the ballroom proper, Amelia felt as though she had stepped into another world. Women glided past in gowns that cost more than her annual salary, their jewelry catching the light like small suns. Men, in perfectly tailored tuxedos, discussed business deals and political connections with the casual ease of people accustomed to wielding power. "Breathe," James whispered in her ear. "You belong here as much as anyone." Their first test came within minutes. Catherine Blackwood approached with a couple Amelia recognized from her research, Richard and Patricia Montgomery, family-owned. A significant portion of Seattle's waterfront real estate. James, darling, you remember Richard and Patricia Montgomery? Catherine's smile was razor-sharp. I was just telling them about your assistant who's joining us this evening. Tricia! Montgomery looked Amelia up and down with the expertise of someone who could estimate the cost of an outfit to the dollar. How interesting. It's so refreshing to see young people mixing business with pleasure. The comment was designed to sound complimentary while implying something inappropriate. About Amelia's presence, before James could respond, Amelia stepped forward. Mrs. Montgomery, what a pleasure to meet you. I've been following your family's waterfront development project with great interest. The environmental impact studies you've commissioned are setting a new standard for sustainable urban planning. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. She hadn't expected detailed knowledge of her business ventures from someone she had dismissed as arm candy. You seem well informed about our projects, Miss Rosewood. I make it my business to stay current with Seattle's major development initiatives, especially when they demonstrate such thoughtful consideration of environmental factors. Richard Montgomery leaned into the conversation. What's your background in urban planning, Miss Rosewood? Business administration with a focus on sustainable development practices. I wrote my senior thesis on balancing economic growth with environmental responsibility in coastal cities. Amelia engaged the Montgomerys in a sophisticated discussion about zoning regulations, KON, environmental impact assessments, and community engagement strategies. By the end of the conversation, both were treating her as an intellectual equal rather than James's questionable choice in companions. As the Montgomerys moved away, clearly impressed despite themselves, Catherine's expression had shifted from smug satisfaction to grudging acknowledgement. Well played, she murmured to Amelia, but the evening is young. Dangerous undercurrents. The cocktail hour provided a series of similar tests as James introduced Amelia to Seattle's power elite. She discussed healthcare policy with hospital board members, debated renewable energy initiatives with tech executives, and charmed elderly philanthropists with her genuine interest in their charitable work. With each successful interaction, Amelia felt her confidence growing. These people weren't as intimidating as she had imagined. Beneath their expensive clothes and polished mannerisms, they were simply people with interests and opinions, and many of which aligned with her own values and knowledge-based, however. She began to notice Preston Hartwell watching her from across the room with an expression that made her uncomfortable. He was an attractive man in his early 40s, with prematurely silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from never doubting one's place in the world. When their eyes met, his smile felt more predatory than friendly. Preston's been circling like a shark all evening, James observed, following her gaze. I think he's waiting for the right moment to make his move. What kind of move? The kind that's designed to expose whatever he thinks he's discovered about your background. Before Amelia could respond, Preston approached with a stunning blonde, a woman who looked like she had stepped off a magazine cover. James, wonderful to see you. This must be the famous Miss Rosewood I've been hearing so much about. Preston's voice carried the smooth charm of a practiced politician. I'd like you to meet Scarlett Davidson, reporter for Seattle Society magazine. Amelia felt her blood run cold. This wasn't a casual introduction. It was an ambush, Miss Rosewood, Scarlett said, pulling out her phone to record. I'm doing a feature on Seattle's new power couples. Could you tell our readers how you and Mr. Blackwood met? We worked together, Amelia said carefully.
Yes.
I understand. You're his assistant. That must make for an interesting dynamic. Some might say it's reminiscent of other famous boss-employee relationships that have made headlines recently. The implication was clear and insulting. Scarlett was suggesting that Amelia was involved in some kind of workplace scandal or inappropriate relationship. James stepped closer to Amelia, his voice carrying a warning. Miss Davidson, I hope you're not planning to print speculation disguised as journalism? Oh no, just exploring the human interest angle, Scarlett continued sweetly. I'm particularly interested in Miss Rosewood's background. It's so inspiring. When people overcome challenging circumstances to find success. Preston's smile widened. Yes, I understand your father had some difficulties with his former employer. Something about making unfounded accusations against school administrators? The attack intensifies. Amelia realized this was the moment Catherine Blackwood had warned her about. Preston had done his research and was preparing to use her family's past as a weapon to destroy her credibility and embarrass James publicly. Amelia said clearly, her voice carrying across the nearby conversations. He was vindicated when the principal was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. I'm proud of him for having the courage to do what was right, even when it cost our family everything. Several nearby guests had stopped their conversations to listen. This was exactly the kind of drama that made Seattle society events memorable, and Amelia could see people positioning themselves to get a better view of the confrontation. Preston wasn't finished. Of course, that kind of history might make some people skeptical about your motivations for pursuing a relationship with one of Seattle's most eligible bachelors, especially given the financial difficulties your family experienced. Hung in the air like poison, Preston was publicly suggesting that Amelia was a gold digger who had seduced James for his money. Using her father's history of causing trouble as evidence of her family's questionable character, Amelia felt the eyes of dozens of Seattle's most influential people focused on her, waiting to see how she would respond. This was her moment of truth. She could retreat, apologize, and disappear back into her small life. Or she could fight back with everything she had learned about courage from her father's example. Mr. Hartwell, you're absolutely right that my family has faced financial difficulties. We lost our home. My parents filed for bankruptcy. My father spent 3 years working as a janitor while fighting to clear his name. But you know what we never lost? Our integrity. Her voice grew stronger with each word. Yes, I'm James's assistant. I work for every dollar I earn. I pay my own bills. And I've never asked him for anything beyond the respect I've earned through my performance. If you want to suggest that I'm with him for his money, I'd be happy to show you my financial records, my student loan statements, and my tax returns. Can you say the same about every other woman in this room? The crowd around them had grown, larger, drawn by the unfolding drama. Amelia could see Catherine Blackwood watching from across the room, her expression unreadable. Furthermore, Amelia continued, if having a father who stood up to corruption disqualifies me from your social circle, then I consider that a badge of honor rather than a source of shame. Preston's confident smile faltered slightly. He'd expected her to crumble under the pressure, not fight back with such articulate passion. James stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Preston, you've made your point. Suggest you drop this line of inquiry before you say something you'll regret. I'm just looking out for your interests, James. Someone needs to ask the hard questions. It's the only hard question here, said a new voice. Is why you're so threatened by a woman who's clearly more intelligent and principled than you expected. Nice. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Patricia Montgomery, the woman Amelia had impressed earlier with her knowledge of urban development. Behind her stood her husband Richard and several other prominent couples. I've spent the last hour watching Miss Rosewood engage in thoughtful conversations about policy, business, and social issues. Patricia continued. She's demonstrated more substantive knowledge than most of the people in this room, including some who were born into the privileges she's earned through hard work. Richard Montgomery nodded agreement. Preston, your behavior tonight is embarrassing. Miss Rosewood has conducted herself with grace and dignity while you've acted like a playground bully. Love declared the support from the Montgomerys shifted the dynamic of the confrontation. Other guests began murmuring agreement, and Preston found himself increasingly isolated. Scarlett Davidson had stopped recording, sensing that the story was not developing the way she had expected. James took Amelia's hand and addressed the crowd that had gathered around them. I'd like to say something to everyone here tonight. 3 years ago, Amelia Rosewood walked into my office for a job interview. I hired her because I saw intelligence, integrity, and determination. Over the past 2 years, she's proven to be not just an exceptional employee, but an exceptional person. He turned to look at her, his gray eyes reflecting emotions he had held back for too long. She's made me a better businessman by challenging my assumptions and offering perspectives I would never have considered. She's made me a better man by showing me what real courage looks like. And tonight, she's shown all of you what real class looks like under pressure. The ballroom had grown quiet, with hundreds of Seattle's elite listening to this public declaration. Amelia, you asked me earlier what happens if this doesn't work out, if we can't make it in my world. I have a different question. What if we create our own world? One where worth is measured by character instead of pedigree, where success is earned rather than inherited? The morning after sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of James's Belltown penthouse. As Amelia woke up in the guest bedroom, momentarily disoriented by the luxury surrounding her. At Egyptian cotton sheets, a view of Elliott Bay. That stretched to the Olympic Mountains, and silence that only money could buy in downtown Seattle. The previous night felt like a dream until she looked at her left hand and saw the engagement ring sparkling in the morning light. The 3-carat diamond was set in platinum with smaller stones, creating a vintage-inspired pattern that managed to be both substantial and elegant. Her phone showed 47 missed calls, 238 text messages, and social media notifications that had stopped counting at 999 plus. Rebecca had left a voicemail that simply said, "Girl, you broke the internet. Call me when you're ready to deal with reality." A soft knock at the door interrupted her review of the digital chaos. "Amelia?" "I made coffee." James's voice carried a note of uncertainty that she found endearing. Even after his grand romantic gesture, he was still unsure of the boundaries in their relationship. "Come in," she called, pulling on the hotel robe she had borrowed the night before. He entered, carrying a tray with coffee, fresh fruit, and pastries from what looked like an expensive bakery. He had changed from his tuxedo into jeans and a casual sweater, looking more like the man she had fallen in love with over 2 years of shared morning coffees and late-night work sessions. "I thought you might be hungry." By the media attention, Amelia accepted the coffee gratefully, noting that he had prepared it exactly how she liked it. A splash of cream, 1 sugar, with a hint of vanilla. After 2 years of working together, he knew her preferences better than most people who claimed to know her well. "James, we need to talk about what happened last night." His expression immediately became guarded. "Are you having regrets?" "But I'm having reality checks." She gestured toward her phone. "According to the internet, I'm either a gold-digging opportunist who seduced my way into a fortune, or a modern-day Cinderella who proved that dreams come true." Right. Neither version feels like me. James sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "What version does feel like you, honestly?" "I feel like a woman who fell in love with her boss and said yes when he asked her to marry him, without thinking through the practical implications." She took a sip of coffee, organizing her thoughts. "I don't know how to be a billionaire's wife. James, I don't know how to handle media attention or social expectations or the kind of responsibility that comes with your family's wealth. What if we figure it out together? What if we create our own version of what our marriage looks like instead of trying to fit into someone else's template?" Before Amelia could respond, the penthouse's security system announced a visitor. James checked the monitor and grimaced. "My mother. She's early." Catherine Blackwood arrived, carrying newspapers, magazines, and a tablet loaded with social media coverage. She had traded her evening gown for a tailored pantsuit. But her expression carried the same intensity Amelia remembered from their first confrontation. "The good news," Catherine announced without preamble, "is that public opinion seems largely supportive. The proposal video has been shared over 2 million times, and most of the commentary is positive." She spread newspapers across James's dining table, like evidence in a trial. The Seattle Times calls it a modern fairy tale. The Post-Intelligencer headline reads, "Local assistant wins hearts and headlines even." Society blogs are mostly favorable. Amelia scanned the headlines, feeling surreal seeing her own face. Staring back from multiple publications, the photos from the engagement showed James on one knee, her expression of genuine surprise and joy, and the crowd of Seattle's elite applauding their moment. "However," Catherine continued, her tone shifting, "there are some concerns we need to address." She pulled up a gossip blog on her tablet. Preston Hartwell gave an interview to Celebrity Seattle after he was escorted from the gala. "He's doubling down on his accusations about your family background and suggesting that James was manipulated into the proposal." The blog post was titled, "Was Billionaire Heir Blackmailed into Engagement?" and featured quotes from Preston questioning the timing of the proposal and suggesting that Amelia had somehow forced James's hand. He's also been contacting potential business partners, trying to raise doubts about James's judgment, Catherine added. 3 companies have requested meetings to discuss their concerns about the Blackwood family's stability and decision-making. Fighting back, James's expression darkened as he read Preston's quotes. He's trying to damage my business relationships because he couldn't destroy my personal ones. It gets worse, Catherine said. He's filed a formal complaint with the Better Business Bureau, claiming that your engagement announcement was a publicity stunt designed to manipulate stock prices in companies where Blackwood Industries has investments. Amelia felt sick. He's using our relationship to attack your business. This is what I was afraid of, Catherine said, though her tone was more resigned than accusatory. Preston represents the old guard families who feel threatened by change. They see your engagement as a crack in the foundation of their social order. Then maybe we should call off the engagement, Amelia said quietly, at least until the business concerns are resolved. Both James and Catherine stared at her in surprise. Absolutely not, James said firmly. We're not going to let Preston Hartwell dictate our personal lives through business intimidation. But if it's hurting your company, my company will survive. What I can't survive is losing you because we were too afraid to fight for what we want. Catherine looked between them with growing respect for Amelia's willingness to sacrifice. Her own happiness for James's well-being and appreciation for her son's determination to protect what mattered most. There might be another way, Catherine said slowly. What if we go on the offensive instead of playing defense? She pulled up another screen on her tablet. I've been doing some research on Preston Hartwell's business practices. It turns out his architectural firm has been cutting corners on city contracts using substandard materials while billing for premium specifications. James leaned forward with interest. How do you know that? I have friends on the City Planning Commission. They've been documenting irregularities in Preston's projects for months. But they needed someone with enough influence to make the accusations stick. Amelia felt uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. Are we talking about blackmail? We're talking about justice, Catherine corrected. Preston is using false accusations to attack our family. I'm suggesting we respond with true accusations about his business practices. I don't want to win by destroying someone else, Amelia said. That makes us no better than him. James took her hand. What if we don't have to destroy him? What if we just need to neutralize his attacks while giving him a face-saving way to back down? The counterattack 2 days later. James arranged a meeting with Preston Hartwell at a neutral location, the Seattle Athletic Club, where both men held memberships and where their conversation would be witnessed by dozens of the city's business elite. Amelia wanted to attend, but James convinced her that this confrontation needed to be handled between the men involved. She waited at the penthouse, pacing between the windows and checking her phone for updates. James arrived at the club to find Preston already seated in the main dining room, positioned so their conversation would be visible to anyone who cared to watch. He looked confident, even smug, as if he had anticipated this meeting and prepared for victory. James, I'm glad you decided to reach out. Hope you've come to your senses about this ill-advised engagement. James sat down and signaled the waiter. For coffee. Actually, I wanted to discuss your recent media interviews and business complaints. I'm just looking out for your interest and those of the business community. Someone needed to ask the hard questions about your assistant's motivations. Her name is Amelia, and she's my fiancée. James's voice carried a warning that Preston chose to ignore. For now. But when the novelty wears off and reality sets in, you'll thank me for trying to protect you from making a permanent mistake. James opened a folder he had brought with him, removing several documents and photographs. Speaking of mistakes, I thought you might want to see these. Preston's confident expression faltered as he recognized city planning documents inspection, reports and photographs showing construction defects in his recent projects. Where did you get these? From the City Planning Commission? Seems they've been investigating reports that your firm has been billing for premium materials while using substandard substitutes. The potential liability exposure is estimated at over $15 million. Preston's face had gone pale. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. Steel composition tests, concrete quality assessments, electrical safety inspections, everything documented by city engineers who were concerned about public safety. James leaned back in his chair, his voice remaining conversational, despite the bombshell he was delivering. Of course, these are just preliminary findings. Investigation could take years to complete, during which time your firm would be under intense scrutiny.